Can someone please explain this to me? Invasive species, both accidental and purposefully introduced, have both had terrible ramifications on the Florida ecosystem. Florida is, by almost any ecological measure, a miracle. Its web of subtropical wetlands, freshwater springs, coastal estuaries, and dense hardwood hammocks hosts a biodiversity found almost nowhere else in the temperate world. The Everglades alone, a slow, shallow river of grass stretching across the southern tip of the peninsula, is one of the planet's most singular ecosystems. A place where alligators, Florida panthers, roseate spoonbills, and manatees navigate a landscape shaped by water, fire, and millions of years of geological time. It is also, today, a landscape under siege. Florida is home to more invasive animal species than any other state in the nation. The list is staggering. Argentine tegus, Nile monitor lizards, green iguanas, lionfish, walking catfish, rhesus macaques. But 4 invasive species stand above the rest, not merely for their individual destruction, but for what they collectively represent: the catastrophic consequences of humanity's casual, careless, and sometimes deliberately reckless relationship with biological introduction. The Burmese python, the bullseye snakehead, kudzu vine, and the cane toad. Some were released by irresponsible pet owners. Some escaped containment during natural disasters. Some were deliberately introduced by government agencies that believed they had found a solution to one problem, only to manufacture a far greater one. All 4 were avoidable. And all 4 are, in their own devastating ways, irreversible. This is their story, and it is a warning. Chapter 1. The Silent Strangler. Burmese python. Python bivitatus. 30 years ago, if you drove the main road through Everglades National Park at dusk, you would have seen them everywhere. Raccoons foraging at the water's edge, opossums trundling through the sawgrass, marsh rabbits darting across the asphalt in the headlights, white-tailed deer standing at the tree line. The Everglades was teeming with the mid-sized mammals that form the connective tissue of any healthy food web. Today, that same drive is largely silent. The raccoons are gone. The opossums are gone. The marsh rabbits have been classified as locally extinct across most of the park's southern reaches. And the reason, confirmed by over a decade of rigorous scientific study, is coiled in the sawgrass and in the cypress heads and in the canal berms. Waiting. The Burmese python arrived in Florida through the exotic pet trade. Native to the forests and grasslands of Southeast Asia, these constrictors were imported in massive numbers throughout the 1980s and 1990s, sold as novelty pets to owners who rarely understood what they were buying. A hatchling Burmese python is manageable. An adult, which can reach nearly 20 feet in length and weigh over 200 pounds, is not. Owners released them. Breeders lost them. And in 1992, Hurricane Andrew destroyed a reptile breeding facility near Homestead, Florida, releasing an unknown number of snakes directly into the Everglades. By the early 2000s, scientists confirmed what locals had been reporting for years. A self-sustaining breeding population had established itself across the greater Everglades ecosystem. By that point, it was already too late for an easy response. The snake, perfectly camouflaged in the tangled landscape of sawgrass and cattail, was nearly impossible to detect. University of Florida researchers have documented that a 14-foot python can be directly next to a trained observer and remain completely invisible. The numbers are almost impossible to absorb. A landmark study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences documented the mammalian collapse in exhaustive detail. Raccoon sightings declined 99.3% since 1997. Opossum sightings fell 98.9%. Bobcat observations dropped 87.5%. Marsh rabbits and cottontail rabbits simply vanished. 0 observations in areas where pythons were most established. Even foxes, once a common sight in the park, could no longer be found. More than 23,000 Burmese pythons have been removed from Florida since systematic hunting programs began. The state pays registered hunters by the hour, with bonuses for snake length and nest removal. Annual competitions draw hundreds of participants competing for cash prizes. In a single 10-day period in 2024, nearly 900 hunters removed fewer than 200 snakes from public lands. It was not enough. It is never enough. Biologists estimate that removed pythons represent perhaps 1% of the actual population. The USGS has stated plainly, eradication of an established reptile population at this scale is not plausible, and the pythons brought something with them. A parasitic lungworm native to Southeast Asia has now spread from the snakes into Florida's native reptile populations, including in areas far north of the python's own range. The parasite has established itself independently. The snakes, in other words, have seeded a second biological invasion that will persist even if the pythons themselves are one day controlled. As climate change pushes Florida's subtropical zone progressively northward, the python's range is expected to expand with it. What is today an Everglades problem may become a statewide one within a generation. Chapter 2. The Fish That Walks Bullseye Snakehead. Channa Marulius. In 2020, a biologist from the U.S. Geological Survey was conducting field work near a pond in Manatee County, Florida, when he observed something that stopped him cold. A fish, elongated, muscular, with a flattened serpentine head, had emerged from the water, slid onto the muddy bank, and was attacking a green tree frog. It consumed the amphibian. Then it returned to the water. The fish was a bullseye snakehead, and it had no business being in Manatee County. The bullseye snakehead first appeared in the waterways of Broward County in the year 2000. No one knows precisely how it arrived, though the most probable explanations are the live food fish trade or the release of aquarium specimens, both well-documented introduction pathways in South Florida. In the more than 2 decades since that first sighting, the species has expanded into Miami-Dade and Palm Beach counties, moving through the region's extensive network of drainage canals with a persistence that has surprised researchers. The snakehead's biology makes it a uniquely troublesome invader. It is an air-breathing fish, equipped with a specialized organ that allows it to extract oxygen directly from the atmosphere. This adaptation, which evolved to help the species survive drought conditions in its native Asian wetlands, means that Florida's shallow, low-oxygen canals and ponds, environments that would stress or kill most native fish, are perfectly habitable to the snakehead. It thrives in the very conditions that eliminate its competition. As an adult, it is a voracious generalist predator, consuming fish, crustaceans, amphibians, small reptiles, and as that 2020 observation confirmed, terrestrial prey when the opportunity presents itself. The USGS has characterized the snakehead as capable of, quote, drastically disrupting food webs and ecological conditions, forever changing native aquatic systems. The concern is not merely competition. It is the restructuring of entire aquatic communities around a new apex predator that the existing food web has no evolutionary answer for. When 400 snakeheads were found in the Manatee County Pond, wildlife officials responded with nets, electrofishing, and fish toxicant, eliminating the population before it could spread. The intervention worked in that location. But the discovery itself was a warning. The species is being transported by humans, intentionally or by accident, to water bodies far outside its established range. The canal network connecting South Florida's developed landscape is a highway for aquatic invasives, and the snakehead is supremely equipped to use it. The International Union for Conservation of Nature has placed the snakehead on its list of the 100 worst invasive species in the world. In Florida, it is quieter and less dramatic than a 20-foot snake. It generates fewer headlines. It should not be underestimated for either of those reasons. Chapter 3. The Vine That Ate the South Kudzu. Pueraria montana var. Lobata. Of all the invasive species threatening Florida's ecosystems, kudzu vine carries perhaps the most damning backstory, because its presence is entirely, unambiguously, the result of deliberate human choice. Not a careless release, not a catastrophic accident. A policy, a federal program, a subsidy. The United States government paid farmers to plant it. Kudzu arrived in America at the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition, where Japanese representatives displayed it as a lush, fast-growing ornamental vine. Seeds made their way into mail-order catalogs. By the early 1900s, it was being sold as shade for porches and fodder for livestock. Then came the Dust Bowl. Confronting catastrophic soil erosion that had stripped the topsoil from millions of southern acres, the U.S. Soil Conservation Service promoted kudzu as a miracle solution, a fast-growing, nitrogen-fixing legume that could stabilize bare earth and restore damaged farmland. Between 1935 and the early 1950s, the government distributed millions of seedlings and paid farmers up to $8 per acre, significant money at the time, to plant it across the South. The vine did what vines do. It grew at a foot per day during peak season. It grew over fences, road signs, power lines, barns, and stands of mature timber. A single vine can reach 100 feet in length. Its underground root system, which can weigh over 400 pounds, stores enough energy to regrow aggressively after burning, mowing, or intensive herbicide application. Kudzu does not retreat. It waits, and it returns. By the 1950s, the alarms were sounding. Kudzu was smothering pine forests. It was shading out entire native plant communities, killing trees not through disease, but through the simple, relentless act of covering them and starving them of light. It was converting biodiverse forest edges into what ecologists call vine barrens, near monocultures devoid of the native insects, birds, and wildlife that had depended on the plants it replaced. The USDA removed kudzu from its recommended cover plant list in 1953. It declared it a common weed in 1970. And in 1997, more than 60 years after the government had been paying to plant it, kudzu was finally listed as a federal noxious weed. Today, it covers an estimated 3 million or more hectares across the southeastern United States. In Florida alone, it has been documented in over 40 counties. The ecological damage extends beyond what the eye can see. Kudzu alters soil chemistry. It increases ground-level ozone pollution by doubling local emissions of nitric oxide. And it serves as primary host plant for the kudzu bug, an invasive stink bug from Asia that arrived in the United States around 2009 and has since become a serious agricultural pest, damaging soybean crops across the entire South. In introducing kudzu, American agriculture inadvertently created the precise conditions for a second invasion to follow in its wake. 1 deliberate mistake. 2 ecological catastrophes. Chapter 4. The Poison in the Yard. Cane Toad. Rhinella marina. The story of the cane toad's introduction to Florida is one of the cleaner cautionary tales in invasive species history, precisely because the error was so clear-cut, so well-intentioned, and so catastrophic in its consequences. In the 1930s, sugarcane growers in South Florida were struggling with beetle infestations damaging their crops. Someone had a solution: import the cane toad, native to Central and South America, known to consume large quantities of insects. The toads were introduced. They did not solve the beetle problem. The beetles lived high on the sugarcane stalks, largely out of reach of a ground-dwelling toad. But the toads survived. They adapted, and they multiplied. The current Florida population is believed to descend primarily from escapes and intentional releases by exotic animal importers in the 1950s and 1960s. By the 1970s, the species was establishing itself across Central and South Florida. Today, cane toads are firmly entrenched south of the I-4 corridor, with documented sightings as far north as Tampa and isolated reports in northern Florida suggesting the range is still expanding. The toad's most immediate threat is its toxicity. Unlike Florida's native toad species, the cane toad possesses large parotoid glands on its shoulders that secrete a substance called bufotoxin, a powerful cardiac poison capable of causing seizures, irregular heartbeat, and death in animals that bite, lick, or otherwise contact the toad. Dogs are the primary suburban victims. Pet owners across Florida are warned that symptoms, frantic behavior, brick-red gums, foaming at the mouth, seizures, can escalate to death in as little as 15 minutes without immediate veterinary intervention. The toad's eggs carry bufotoxin as well, meaning even tadpoles pose a lethal threat to animals that might ingest them. For Florida's native wildlife, the consequences are equally severe. Native snakes, raptors, and reptiles that attempt to prey on the toads receive a potentially lethal dose, effectively removing predators from the local food web. The toad's impact in Australia, where it was introduced in 1935 under nearly identical agricultural pretexts, serves as a grim preview. Monitor lizards, freshwater crocodiles, and numerous snake species experienced population crashes in toad-invaded areas because these predators had no evolved avoidance behavior for a prey item whose toxicity they had no way of anticipating. The cane toad is also a relentless competitor. Its diet includes insects, native frogs, lizards, small snakes, small mammals, birds, and anything else it can fit in its mouth. It competes directly with Florida's 4 native toad species, particularly the southern toad, for food, territory, and breeding sites. Given its superior size, it typically wins. It breeds year-round in any standing water: canals, ditches, ornamental ponds, even puddles. A single female can produce roughly 40,000 eggs every few weeks. Florida residents are now legally permitted to humanely euthanize cane toads on their own property without a permit. The regularity with which that guidance appears in official state communications tells its own story about how completely this toad has embedded itself in the daily life of Floridians. Closing 4 species, 1 ecosystem, and a pattern that repeats again and again with devastating consistency. The pet trade that made a Southeast Asian constrictor a commodity. The government program that paid to carpet the South in an invasive vine. The sugar industry's appetite for a cheap biological solution. The aquarium enthusiast who opened a car window over a Florida canal. What unites the python, the snakehead, the kudzu, and the cane toad is not bad luck. It is human decision-making. Policy failures. Regulatory failures. A fundamental, persistent inability to think past the convenience of the moment to the ecological consequences that follow. And the ecosystem that is paying the price, one of the most singular and irreplaceable on the planet, had no vote in any of it. The Everglades did not choose the python. The canals of Broward County did not choose the snakehead. The pine forests of the Florida Panhandle did not choose to be smothered. The southern toad did not choose its competition. We made these choices, and the natural world is living and dying with them. Florida's invasive species crisis is not a footnote in an environmental report. It is a mirror held up to a century of human arrogance, and what it reflects is clear. When we treat living ecosystems as problems to be engineered, when we import, plant, and release species without humility or foresight, we do not solve problems. We create ones that outlast us. The question now is not whether the damage can be undone. For the most part, it cannot. The question is whether we are willing to learn, finally, seriously, and urgently, before we make the next version of the same catastrophic mistake. So explain to me why nothing's changing. I hate the idea of telling people what they can and can't have as pets. However, the devastation we are seeing is both heartbreaking and irreversible. Should a once pristine ecosystem be written off so you can have a pretty fish in your home aquarium? Should industry be able to introduce a specimen from the other side of the world in an attempt to protect their monoculture crop? Or even worse, should the government be allowed to propagate horticulture with no idea of how it will impact the target ecosystem with no thought to long-term effects? If this story made you think differently about what happens to the native wildlife when you are in the pet store or garden department, good. And if you want more topics like this, please like and subscribe, because there are a lot more stories buried out there.